The room was quiet, except for the way she looked at him. No shouting, no tears, just this calm, steady gaze that made the man in front of her shift uncomfortably in his chair. He had seen her cry before. He had seen her plead, apologize for things she didn't even need to. Hell, she'd even taken the blame for his betrayals. But this time, nothing. No anger, no guilt, no crack in her eyes he could wedge into. Carl Jung once said, that's one of the most chilling moments in human psychology. The exact second a true empath stops taking in your pain and just sees you clearly for who you really are. Because for years, she's been like a sponge, soaking up every word, every outburst, every lie, quietly holding all that pain in the softest parts of herself, bruises you couldn't see. She was the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who understood everyone else's wounds while pretending her own didn't exist. But this was different. Her stillness wasn't emptiness, it was precision. Every memory, every broken promise, every little shift in his voice over the years was stored away. Not as anger, but as a private archive he didn't know existed. She'd figured out the shape of his fears, the cracks in his confidence, the blind spots in his armor. Now, she looked at him the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, not to break, but to remove what doesn't belong. Carl Jung spent decades studying the kinds of people who end up as society's emotional prey. But just as important, what happens the moment they turn cold, harder, and more dangerous than the very predators who once fed on them. He called it a psychological transformation so complete, it changes how a person sees the world and themselves forever. Today, we're going to break down exactly what happens during that transformation, the stages it goes through, the triggers that set it off, and why a cold empath isn't just immune to manipulation, but usually one step ahead of the manipulator. And if you've ever felt like you see more than you should, by the end of this video, you might realize you're closer to that transformation than you think. For as long as anyone can remember, the cultural idea of an empath has been almost painfully predictable. Someone endlessly giving, harmless almost to a fault, so fragile they demand protection, not respect. The nice one in the group, the peacemaker in the family, the friend who stays up all night listening, even when their world is falling apart. It's the version of you the world praises, but only when it suits them. That stereotype, as comforting as it sounds, is a trap. It's a role written by those who benefit from your silence. A story that keeps you pouring out your energy while expecting nothing in return. It's a script telling you that the good empath is endlessly available, endlessly forgiving, endlessly exploitable. But Carl Jung had a very different take. In his work on sensitivity, projection, and individuation, he noticed that highly sensitive people often act like unconscious mirrors for those around them. Not just picking up moods, but motives. Not just hearing words, but sensing the tension underneath. Jung didn't see this as weakness. He saw it as an advanced kind of perception, one that could be a form of consciousness evolution, turning a sensitive person into one of the most psychologically powerful humans possible. Here's the paradox no one really tells you. The very traits that make you vulnerable at first are the same ones that, once integrated, make you untouchable. Sensitivity is not the opposite of strength. It's actually the foundation for a kind of strength most people will never understand. And that's exactly why manipulators try so hard to suppress it before you realize its true value. Think about your ability to catch shifts in tone before a word is spoken, to read micro-expressions, to notice when someone's story changes mid-sentence. These aren't just feelings, these are skills. Skills that narcissists and manipulators know can completely dismantle them if you turn that radar outward instead of inward. So what do? They teach you to doubt those skills, to apologize for them, to tell you you're overreacting. They convince you your emotional radar is a liability, because if you ever fully trusted it, you'd see right through their game. The truth, many empaths spend years in that fog, believing the myth of their own fragility. But when the fog lifts, when you finally see the story for exactly what it is, everything changes. The very person who used to buckle under the weight of everyone else's needs becomes someone no one dares to manipulate twice. The gentle not gentle in the way people expect. You can care deeply without being controlled. You can give without being drained dry. And when you do, you break out of the safe little box the world built for you. You become something far more dangerous too. Those who want to exploit you, a person who chooses where their empathy goes. If you've ever wondered why manipulators and narcissists seem to zero in on you in a crowd, it's not your imagination. And it's definitely not bad luck. It's a psychological pattern. Carl Jung observed that sensitive people act like mirrors. You reflect other people's emotions, even the ones they try to hide from themselves. Healthy people might find that comforting, but predators see it as an opening, a chance to dump their pain, shame, and guilt onto someone else. I call this the projection magnet effect. When you're an empath, you don't just pick up moods, absorb them. For a narcissist, that means they've found the perfect person to carry their unresolved damage. They can unload their chaos without consequences because you take it on, and even feel responsible for fixing it. And that's just the beginning. Once the predator knows you'll absorb their chaos, they start using psychological tricks to keep you stuck, gaslighting, slowly eroding your sense of reality. They deny what happened, twist your words, and plant doubts until you question your own perception. For an empath used to second-guessing their feelings, this is like a weapon. Guilt binds you, manipulates you into feeling responsible for their behavior. If you really cared, you wouldn't make me angry. After everything I've been through, how can you leave me? Boundaries become framed as cruelty. It's emotional labor, non-stop, managing their moods, anticipating their needs, soothing their insecurities, all at the expense of your well-being. Maybe you've noticed it in small ways. The friend who only calls when crisis hits but vanishes when you need them. The partner who explodes in anger and immediately blames stress or childhood trauma, and you forgive again. The family member so good at playing the victim that you swallow your frustration just to keep the peace. Here's the hard truth. Predators don't accidentally stumble into empaths' lives. They seek you out because they can tell the difference between someone who will push back and someone who will absorb. Until that dynamic is broken, it repeats over and over. But here's what they don't see coming. Every word, every manipulation, every lie you faced, you noticed it all. You stored it. And one day, that mental archive flips the entire game. Because there's a moment, the turning point, when an empath stops using their sensitivity to keep the peace and starts using it to cut through the lies and see the truth. That's the moment predators fear the most. Betrayal doesn't just break trust, it rearranges how you see everything. For most empaths, this erosion starts long before the breaking point. You catch the tiny inconsistencies. You feel the shifts in tone, the pauses that hold something unspoken, but you convince yourself to hope. You tell yourself, love means giving the benefit of the doubt, time and time again. And then, one day, hope runs out. There's no space left for doubt. For Carl Jung, betrayal was the ultimate trigger. In an empath's transformation, it's the moment when perception finally overpowers hope. Not some small slight or petty argument, but a rupture deep enough to force the mind and soul into facing its own shadow. Sometimes it's discovering infidelity. Sometimes it's finding out about a financial deception or a hidden double life. Whatever the cause, it brings the same crushing realization. I knew this was coming, and I ignored it. That's when everything inside you shifts. The very first thing to fade is the emotional noise. The heart, which once raced at every conflict, slows. The flood of feelings that clouded your mind suddenly drains away, leaving everything startlingly clear. You start to notice every detail, the way their voice tightens when they say certain words, the flicker in their eyes when you speak, how their breathing shifts whenever you hit a nerve. That's like someone finally took the lens you've been holding your entire life and pulled it into perfect focus. What you feel now isn't rage. It's not sadness either. It's precision. And precision is dangerous. Jung called this moment a confrontation with the shadow. The point when you stop denying parts of yourself you were taught to hide. For the empath, that shadow isn't dark or cruel. It's the intelligence you were told was overthinking. The intuition you heard was too sensitive. The strength you were made to believe was selfish. In this clarity event, all those hidden parts step forward together for the first time and start working as one. Predators expect chaos. They expect tears, shouting, begging, the emotional warfare they know best. But what they aren't ready for is your silence. That stillness, that unshakable calm makes them uneasy. Because, in that silence, they realize you've been paying attention this whole time. Jung wrote that in this state, the empath's mind works like a strategist's war room. Those years of stored observations aren't just memories anymore. They become a map. And with that map, you navigate every interaction with surgical precision. This isn't revenge. This isn't cruelty. This is the end of self-deception. Once you cross this point, there's no going back to the person who tolerated the intolerable. You've seen too much. You've felt the difference between living in a fog and seeing the world with total clarity. And once you know that feeling, you can't unknow it. Jung believed this transformation is irreversible, not because you become hardened, but because you finally trust your own perception. From here on out, manipulation loses its power. Guilt stops being a leash. The narcissist who once thrived on your compliance, they find themselves exposed without you even raising your voice. If you've ever had that moment when the truth became louder than your hope, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Go ahead, write it down in the comments. I have had my clarity event, because in the next section, we're going to pull back the curtain on what happens after that moment when you shift from absorber to strategist, and why that's the moment every manipulator fears the most. Most people, when they think of empathy, picture intuition, mysterious sixth sense, or a gut feeling they can't explain. But for the cold empath, it's not magic, it's memory, it's data. Long before that clarity event, an empath is already gathering information. Every sigh, every pause, every tone change, every time someone's words don't quite match their body language, all of it gets stored away, not consciously, not like a detective with a notebook. It happens quietly in the background of day-to-day life. Over years, this builds into a living archive, a catalog of micro-expressions, speech patterns, emotional triggers, and behavioral quirks. Most of the time, this archive sits quietly. Empaths don't use it because they're busy absorbing, smoothing things over, keeping the peace, choosing others' comfort instead of their own clarity. Then betrayal flips a switch. The archive unlocks. Suddenly, all those little moments you brushed off, all the lies you swallowed, all the gut feelings you talked yourself out of, they flood to the surface in perfect order. You don't need to dig for proof. It's all right there. Every time they deflected blame, every conversation where they forgot what they said before, every time their smile was a fraction too late. It's not rage driving you now, it's recognition. And that's where the cold empath breaks away from the stereotype. A reactive person might yell out accusations, fueled by pain and adrenaline. The manipulator could dismiss that as overreaction and keep the upper hand. But the cold empath, they don't react, they present. The difference is devastating. Instead of emotional chaos, they speak with surgical precision. On this day you said this, 2 weeks ago, you said the opposite. And here's what you did right after. It's a kind of precision that leaves no space for denial, because it's not about feelings anymore. It's about facts. Carl Jung saw this, not as revenge, but as integration. In his view, the empath's sensitivity, combined with their archive of observations, created what he called complete perception. Once they stop using their perception to excuse others' behavior, they use it to expose it calmly, clearly, without the need for emotional escalation. And that's exactly what makes the cold empath more dangerous than the narcissist. They've mastered the narcissist's own game, without the ego blind spots or the need for control. The narcissist manipulates in the moment. The cold empath has been tracking the entire timeline. If you've ever felt like you know when someone's lying, or you notice tiny details others miss, here's the truth. You're not paranoid, you're not overly sensitive, you're perceptive. You've been collecting this information for years. You just haven't started using it like a strategy yet. And when you do, the whole dynamic shifts. Forever, the predator who once used your empathy as a weakness now faces it as a weapon they can't defend against. Now, let's talk about what happens after that moment. The shift from being an absorber of emotions to becoming a strategist. This is the part every manipulator fears the most. Most people think empathy is some kind of mysterious, sixth sense gut feeling you can't quite explain. But for the cold empath, it's not magic at all. It's memory, it's data. Long before the clarity event even happens, the empath is quietly collecting information. Every sigh, every nervous pause, every shift in tone, and every time someone's words don't match their body language, it all gets stored away, not consciously, like someone jotting notes in a detective's notebook, but in the background of daily life. Over years, this builds into a living archive, a detailed catalog of micro-expressions, speech habits, emotional triggers, and behavioral inconsistencies. Most of the time, this archive stays dormant. Empaths don't consciously use it because they're too busy absorbing, smoothing over tensions, holding the peace. and protecting others' comfort at the expense of their own clarity. Betrayal changes everything. When that archive unlocks, the moment of betrayal doesn't simply shatter trust, it flips a switch. All the little moments you brushed off, all the lies you swallowed, all those gut feelings you talked yourself out of, they suddenly flood to the surface in perfect order. Don't have to search for evidence. It's already there. Every time they shifted blame, every conversation where they contradicted themselves, every smile that was a second too late. And it's not rage that drives you now, it's recognition. This is the moment the cold empath breaks, free from the stereotype. A reactive person might shout accusations fueled by anger and adrenaline, and manipulators can dismiss that as an overreaction to keep control. But the cold they don't react emotionally, they present the facts, and that's a game changer. Instead of chaos, they speak with surgical precision. On this day, you said this. 2 weeks ago, you said the complete opposite, and here's what you did right after. It's the kind of precision that leaves no room for denial, because it's not about feelings anymore, it's about facts. Carl Jung called this integration. For him, an empath's sensitivity combined with their stored observations created what he called complete perception. Once an empath stops using that perception to excuse others' bad behavior, they can use it to expose it calmly, clearly, and without emotional escalation. And this is exactly why the cold empath is more dangerous than the narcissist. They've mastered the narcissist's own game, but without the ego's blind spots or the craving for control. Where the narcissist plays in the moment, the cold empath has been watching the entire timeline unfold. If you've ever felt like you can tell when someone's lying, or you catch tiny details others miss, here's what's really going on. You're not paranoid, you're not overly sensitive, you're insanely perceptive. You've been gathering this intel for years, you just haven't yet turned it into a weapon. And when you do, everything changes. The predator who once used your empathy as a weakness now faces it as an unbreakable advantage. Here's where Jung's concept of individuation comes in, the process of becoming whole by integrating all the hidden or denied parts of yourself into your conscious awareness. For the cold empath, this process happens in 3 clear stages. I call this the cold empath integration model. Stage 1 is recognition, identifying and accepting your shadow. Before the clarity event, most empaths live split in 2. On the surface, they show kindness, patience, and compassion. But beneath they carry traits they've been taught to hide: anger, intelligence, discernment, and the right to set boundaries. Recognition happens the moment you stop seeing these qualities as flaws. It often starts small, replaying conversations in your mind and noticing the subtle manipulations you ignored at the time, feeling anger and realizing it's not cruelty, but self-respect. Understanding that your intuition isn't overreacting, but accurately recognizing patterns. Quick micro-test. Think about a recent time someone dismissed your feelings. Did you instantly question yourself? Or did you quietly register it as a red flag? If it's the latter, congratulations, you're already in recognition. Jung believed this stage is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see the shape of everything that was always there, and the outlines are sharper than you expected. Stage 2 is integration, merging your light and shadow. Recognition alone isn't enough. Integration is where you stop keeping emotional depth and analytical clarity in separate boxes. They become one. This is where the transformation speeds up. Instead of choosing between caring and seeing clearly, you realize you can do both simultaneously. You can feel someone's pain without excusing harmful behavior. You can offer empathy without sacrificing your boundaries. The mind and heart begin to work together. Perception informs compassion, and compassion guides action. This is the opposite of what manipulators expect. They're used to exploiting emotional openness and avoiding analytical scrutiny. But when those 2 forces come together, it changes the game. Say a manipulator tries to guilt you for setting a limit. I guess I just can't count on you anymore. Before, you'd feel crushed by the guilt and scramble to fix things. You feel the guilt but recognize it instantly as manipulation. Instead of folding, you respond calmly. My decision stands. No anger, no over-explaining, just clear kindness. Notice how you explain your boundaries less and less, while your clarity grows. That's integration. Stage 3 is application, using selective empathy as a strategic tool. This is the stage that turns the cold empath into a force that predators actively avoid. Application means empathy is no longer a reflex or a habit. It's a conscious, deliberate choice. The cold empath stops pouring their energy into every single person or problem. Instead, they direct their energy with surgical precision, offering empathy only where it will be valued, respected, and returned. Make no mistake, this isn't about shutting down or detachment. It's about selectivity, and that changes everything. Think about that toxic coworker who always drags you into office drama. Instead of engaging and trying to keep the peace, you listen but you don't feed the fire with emotional fuel. Your calm disengagement makes them move on to the next target. Meanwhile, with a friend who's genuinely struggling, you're fully present. You show up because you know your support can help them grow, not hold them back. Carl Jung called this full individuation, the moment a person is no longer controlled by unconscious patterns, but chooses their role in every interaction. At the end of the week, take a moment to ask yourself, where did your emotional energy go? Was it spread thin across people who drain you? Or was it focused on those who lift you up? If you can answer that question without guilt, you're in application now. Here's the truth about narcissists and manipulators. Their power doesn't come from brute force, it comes from finding your blind spots. They scan for cracks in your self-perception, the places where you still question yourself, and then they push their way in. That's how they control the narrative, twist your reality, and keep you doubting the truth you already know. But here's the problem for them. A cold empath has no blind spots left to exploit. Once you've reached full integration, you've confronted every part of yourself that could ever be used against you. Your anger no longer feels shameful. Your boundaries aren't negotiable. Your perception isn't something you second guess anymore. And because of that, the narcissist's whole playbook starts to fall apart. Their game relies on you defending yourself, on you scrambling to prove your worth. But when you finally stop needing their approval, their entire strategy collapses, and manipulators can sense this. They can feel it. Carl Jung even described this as the predator's instinct, an unspoken detection system in those who prey on others. Just like a wolf avoids a stag that doesn't run, manipulators avoid someone who won't feed their ego. They can tell when their hooks won't land, sometimes before a single word is exchanged. Imagine this: a narcissistic colleague tries to bait you in a meeting, pushing you to defend yourself. In the past, you might have rushed to clarify, smoothed things over, or tried to reassure them. But now, you meet their accusation with the same calm, steady gaze that's become your hallmark. You neither deny nor over-explain. You simply state the truth once, with precision, and then let the silence hang. They shift in their seat. They no longer have access to you. What used to be a game of push and pull turns into a brick wall. And here's the thing they can't handle. You're not trying to win. You've already won by refusing to play their game. The cold empath doesn't overpower the narcissist with aggression. They outlast them with clarity, with no emotional chaos to manipulate. The narcissist is left naked. Every tactic, the guilt trips, the flattery, the intimidation falls flat. They look exposed in real time. And the part that scares narcissists the most, the cold empath's stillness. They expect resistance. They brace for anger, tears, desperate bargaining, but they're not prepared for the kind of calm that comes with knowing you can't be touched. This is why the cold empath is more dangerous than the narcissist. The narcissist's power only exists when someone takes the bait. The cold empath's power is self-sustaining. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't require the other person to change. It's simply there. An unshakable presence that turns the predator's instinct into avoidance. Once you reach this point, you'll notice the shift. People who used to test your limits quietly stop trying. Those who thrived on your compliance drift away, and the ones who respect your boundaries, they stick around. Because now, your empathy isn't a resource for others to exploit. It's a gift you choose to give. Carl Jung admired the transformation of the integrated empath, but he also feared it, not because they became cruel, but because the power they unlock can so easily be turned in the wrong direction. When an empath reaches full integration, they gain a kind of psychological vision most people never experience. They can read a person's motives in seconds. They can sense emotional pressure points without asking a single question, and if they choose, they could use those insights to control and dismantle another person's reality as easily as they once were controlled themselves. This is the shadow side of transformation, and it's the exact reason Jung insisted ethics matter as much as Awakening. Because the same clarity that has the power to heal can also destroy. Imagine an integrated empath choosing to fight fire with fire instead of protecting themselves. They use their perception to corner and humiliate. Instead of setting boundaries, they weaponize them to punish. Instead of exposing lies, they engineer situations to provoke in the wrong hands. This gift becomes indistinguishable from the manipulators' arsenal, only sharper and more effective. This is the crossroads every awakened empath eventually faces. Do you use your power to heal or to harm? Healing doesn't mean forgiving everyone or letting injustice slide. It means choosing your battles with purpose, refusing to waste energy on revenge. That leaves you empty. It means using your insight to strengthen yourself and the people who deserve to stand beside you, not to break others for the satisfaction of proving you can harm. That's easy. Legacy. That's harder. Jung warned that without ethical grounding, an awakened empath could become as dangerous as the predators they once feared, but with far more precision. And that's why this choice defines your entire life. After transformation, because the path you choose doesn't just shape you, it ripples outward into your relationships, your community, even your family's next generation. A cold empath doesn't just change themselves, they change the systems around them. And that change is rarely quiet in families. The pattern is almost predictable. The person who used to absorb everyone's tension simply stops, and the dynamic either falls apart or restructures entirely. The sibling who once used guilt to get their way finds no longer works. The parent who relied on emotional manipulation to maintain control suddenly faces silence where compliance used to be. The family is left with two options: evolve into healthier relationships or fracture under the weight of unaddressed truth. At work, the transformation is just as disruptive. Office politics thrive on unspoken rules, half-truths, alliances, and secrets that keep some people in control. But when a cold empath refuses to play the game, everything shifts. Manipulators who once maneuvered behind the scenes find their tactics failing. Projects run more smoothly. Conversations become more direct. Some people resent the change, but others quietly start emulating that same clarity. Communities feel it too, even if no one knows exactly why. The presence of a cold empath changes the energy in the room. People who operate with integrity feel safer because they know they won't be undermined in the shadows. Those who depend on subtle control and hidden agendas start to keep their distance, sensing their stories can no longer be spun without being exposed. Jung believed this ripple effect was inevitable. Once a person's perception clears, they become a living mirror. They reflect back the truth of others, not with judgment, but without distortion. That reflection forces choices. Some people rise to meet it, others run. And here's the most striking part. The cold empath rarely has to say a word to make it happen. The transformation that started as personal survival becomes something bigger, a catalyst for truth. Not truth as a weapon, but truth as a constant presence. The kind of presence that quietly demands those around it either grow stronger or reveal their weaknesses. If you've ever watched a relationship, a workplace, or even a friendship group shift simply because you stopped playing your old role, you've already seen this ripple effect in action. And now we come full circle to the most important question. From the very start, this hasn't just been about them. The narcissists, the manipulators, the ones who believed you'd never see through their game. It's been about you, about the moment you stop being defined by the roles you were given and start defining yourself. We began with that silent, unblinking gaze, the one that made the predator in the room shift uncomfortably in their seat. That moment wasn't just a reaction, it was the birth of something different, something unshakable. But here's the question that really matters now. When your moment comes, will you control the transformation, or will you let it control you? Because here's the truth. Once it begins, there's no going back. The cold empath isn't a costume you put on and take off. It's the integration of every lesson you've learned, every betrayal endured, every pattern you've seen. And with it comes a choice that will echo through every interaction you have from this day forward. Some will use that clarity to heal, to protect others from the pain they've survived. Others will let the shadow take the wheel, turning power into poison. Jung warned us about this crossroads. He knew that the gift of vision always carries the temptation to weaponize it. So maybe the real measure of transformation isn't whether you change but how you choose to live once you do. If you've made it this far into this conversation, it means you already see more than most. Say it out loud. Type it in the comments so it becomes real. I see everything. I choose where to look. And if this touched something deep inside you, stay in the circle. Not because I asked you to, but because this is where people who see through the noise find each other. The more of us there are, the harder it becomes for the old games to survive. The transformation is coming. Maybe for you, maybe for someone you love. When it does, be ready to choose.